Greetings, this is Dr. Della Welch again. As I've stated, I've taught business law for over 35 years, and I also have a doctorate degree in educational administration. I'm trying to put many of these lectures on to help business law or law students. Our topic for today will be torts, T-O-R-T-S. Now, torts sounds like a French dessert, and it sounds delicious, but it's not. Tort is a French word for wrong. So the definition of tort is a private wrong other than a breach of contract for which the law will provide a remedy. The tortfeasor is the defendant. The standard of proof in civil cases is the preponderance of evidence. It's not the criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. The preponderance of evidence some people think of as 51%, or if you had a scale, it's like a feather, it's slightly higher on the other side, and you have met your burden of proof. Now, there are three categories of torts. The first would be intentional. The second would be carelessness or failure to act as a reasonable person. The third is strict liability. That would be like ultra-hazardous conditions, blasting, fumigating, or maybe you have a pet python and it gets out while you're at work and it squeezes the neighborhood boy to death. Well, the theory the other side would sue you for is strict liability. That's more of an absolute liability. Now I want to talk again about intentional torts, and I have a mnemonic. I call it BAFI, B-A-F-I. So the first intentional tort is battery, and you need to have a good definition of that. That is the harmful or offensive, intentional touching of the person of another without consent or without privilege. So remember, it can be harmful or offensive. Perhaps you go on a field trip and you get sleepy and you're sleeping under a tree and you're kissed by a homeless person. Well, that may not be harmful unless he has some disease, but it's certainly offensive. The class was laughing. And then in terms of the person of another, you may touch something closely associated with the person. Let's say, for example, that I go to eat at a buffet, and I grab a plate, and then one of my students comes and grabs the plate out of my hand and says, "We don't let teachers eat here." Well, that's touching something closely connected with me, and so that would be a battery. Perhaps I'm carrying an umbrella, and you knock the umbrella out of my hand, but you didn't touch my hand. That would be a battery. Suppose I have a cane. That is closely connected. That would be a battery. Suppose I'm riding a bicycle and you hit the bicycle. Well, that is closely connected if I'm riding it. So that would be a battery. And then a assault is the A. B-A. So battery is B. A is assault. And an assault is an awareness of an immediate battery, attempted battery. So let's say that one of my students said, "Teacher, I don't like your class." And they call me on the phone and express the same sentiment. And they say, "The next time we see you at class, we're going to punch your lights out." Well, I'd have to wait till the following week. That wouldn't be an assault because that's not immediate. It has to be an immediate or imminent type of harm. You don't need to have the touching. You just have to be aware that you're about to be touched. So remember, battery does require the touching, and assault, you only have to be aware that you might be touched. So now we know the B and the A. Now let's learn the F. F is false imprisonment. That's where the defendant does an act that confines plaintiff in a specific area with no reasonable means of ingress or egress. Suppose that you and I are standing in a room and we receive from a fellow teacher a telephone call. And they said, "We have locked all the doors," the teacher says, "so you can't get out. But behind the exit sign is a 3-foot pipe, and you can slither out the pipe." Well, that would not be a reasonable means of egress, so that would be false imprisonment. So now we know the B, A, F. Now we know the I. Intentional infliction of mental distress. That is the extreme, outrageous act designed to cause mental distress, and it does. The famous example is one fellow lived next to a neighbor who was always digging for gold. Well, what the neighbor did is he put some fool's gold there, and she came running over. She had just found gold. And he said, "Oh, that's exciting. Let's take you on a parade and parade you throughout the city so everyone sees the gold that you found." And then after she's there with all her excitement, he said, "April Fool, I just did this to trick you." Well, she had a mental decompensation from that, and that's a classic example of intentional infliction of mental distress. So now you know the intentional torts to the person, BAFI, and our next tape we will learn the intentional torts to property, which are TCC, which would be trespass to land, trespass to chattel, and conversion. That will be for our next